So,
So here we
Divya,
go.
here we go.
Hello.
So, hello and welcome to this conversation on this new platform, Open Ended. As a reminder, Open Ended is a platform for activist designers and thinkers from around the world. We're going to be exploring the spaces where creativity, culture, design intersect with tech, science, and engineering with a lens on really challenging existing structures and narratives in different ways. So we're welcoming you to join in this diverse community of creators and thinkers. And I am super, super honored and thrilled to have Divya Thakur join us today.
Thank
I'm
you for
going to
having
give
me. I'm
you,
delighted to be here. Yeah.
oh, thank you. It's really,
Mm.
really an incredible honor. And I'll give you a little bit of an introduction on Divya, but I should say that she is somebody who's inspired me from the first day that I met her. And I still remember, Divya, coming to your incredible house in Bombay. We know each other through dear, dear family. And so we have very deep connections and layers that bring us together and have brought us together over the years. But beyond that, she's an incredibly warm, amazing person to be around. She draws people to her home, to her creativity, to her projects like a magnet. But she's also constantly thinking and driving towards the future. In fact, I think there's a restlessness about how you see the world, not only from the lens of design, but also from the lens of just living and existing. Really honored to have you here. And I will give a bio on yourself, and we can go on and talk a little bit more about your work. So I would say
Sure.
that Divya is ultimate and curator. She brings live people together, and she's consistently shaping the idea of a contemporary Indian design identity. Based in Mumbai, she's had exhibitions and projects spanning the world, from Salone del Mobile to the CSMVS Museum in Mumbai, to Google
Yeah.
Arts and Culture, and beyond. She is a powerhouse in design thinking, product, and practice. And I'd say over a period of 20 plus years, she has consistently just blazed new paths across multiple disciplines, from product design to graphics, scenography. She's worked in film. Obviously, she's in Bombay. There's a lot going on with the visual arts and film there also. And she's become, probably without planning it, a critical force in shaping taste and trend across the spectrum of Indian fashion, design, and art. So we'll share a lot more about Divya, her work, and her plans for the future in our newsletter. But for this conversation, we're going to be speaking with her about her career and about a few of the initiatives that she's worked on over time, which have helped to shape not only who she is as a designer, but also her space in contemporary global design. So without much further ado, Divya, I just wanted to really ask you to set the scene a little bit. You grew up traveling across India. How did you get into the space of design? Just, very briefly, just a little bit of a sense of how you ended up calling yourself a designer.
I mean, just one thing led to another, and I was just flowing like a river, and I landed up in design. I love to draw, I love to paint since I was really little. So I just landed up being put into art school, and I loved it. And I went into advertising when I graduated from art school, just because that was the only option available. At that time, there weren't too many design agencies in Bombay. And I did that, and I enjoyed it very much. And when I was ready to start something that transgressed boundaries and wasn't confined to a particular medium, I started my own design agency. And so I don't think I started out saying, let me be a designer. I think I just landed up becoming that. Also, I think in addition to being a designer, I'm a believer in spirituality. So I believe that if you just flow, then it will take you to your path. So I think that's where it took me, and here I
I
am.
love that. And so you don't just work in design, you embody it. You live in this incredible space, which I know has been described as a museum by the New York Times years and years ago. And I know that you also think about the way your work sort of flows into one project flows into another, just as you described. So where was the beginning of it with India? I would define you as, you're a global force, but you're very much an Indian designer. And I know you've been constantly working towards using the culture and aesthetic of what Indian design represents to shape your work?
Like I said, I think when I was in advertising, and I spent many years in it, close to 8 years in advertising, we acquired many skills, and it was great learning. But most of the time, we looked to the West for inspiration in terms of how to communicate, what kind of language, what kind of visual language to give our communication. And so all of us aspired, whether it was an ad film we were creating, or whether it was a print ad or packaging design or anything, it tended to look to the West to create an international style. And so therefore, I think in 99, when the whole world wondered what they wanted to do with the millennium, I wanted to start my own company. And a part of starting my own company, which I founded Design Temple, was that I wanted to find an articulation of a contemporary visual grammar for India, a visual grammar for India. And that's really where it started. It was sort of like having learned something and acquired it and enjoyed it very much. I loved all of that. It was really great. But I just felt that I said, why am I constantly looking? Why are all of us just constantly looking to the West when there is so much that we can do with ourselves here? And it was an interesting time. Different people were doing different experiments. And I'm talking about 99, 2000, as we started. Those 10 years were really, I think, interesting in India at that time. Lots of new things were going on. It was really at that point of change. So I think I began consciously my experiments with design, as I would like to paraphrase from Mahatma Gandhi. I began my experiments with design at that time, yeah. And it hasn't ended. It keeps changing. But I like that. I like that it keeps evolving. I like that my own approach, my own thinking keeps changing. And I'm open to that, and I enjoy that. It's not rigid in that sense.
I mean, I also love the way you define that, because, we'll come to this later, but you recently did this incredible collaboration with Google Arts and Culture, and in tech companies, we define, an experiment is something that moves you that much further forward,
right?
But you don't have to succeed. You are just
right.
pushing new ground and often breaking things. And it's amazing that you use that word with, I think it's easier to think that there's less risk when you're dealing with something in the virtual space. But if you're because you deal equally with the tangible, I think it feels really brave.
And it's brave and it's
something.
Foolish.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brave and it's foolish. But it's okay. There is great. I think this is something that every entrepreneur needs to learn. I'd rather have loved and lost than not loved at all. So I'd rather try something and fail at it. I am very proud of the fact that I tried. So the result is really not something that I'm after. I really, the process of learning in itself is huge for me. So I attach a lot of importance to process. And to my goal, like, what is it that I'm trying to do? So if I'm directionless, I would not be happy with that. I would like to have a goal. I would like to think about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I'd like to work towards it, but I'm detached from how it, or at least I think almost on all good days, I'm detached to the outcome.
I think so for that, like, it would be really interesting to hear about where things haven't worked, right? In the places where, I mean, do you feel like, for example, in this journey in defining this new visual vocabulary, I mean, obviously from a personal perspective, as, a young woman in India, really forging this path for design, or just in general, kind of redefining how people in India see their own culture. I think, you've been quoted in the New York Times as, you said, for centuries, intellectual, artistic, and spiritual capital of India has been plucked, exploited, and plundered with barely a line of credit. And we know this, right? We know that there's so much that's taken outside, but you have reclaimed it, you brought it back home, and you've taken it in an interesting direction. So are there any examples of, where you feel like you just felt really frustrated with something just didn't go in the direction that you expected it to?
Yeah, I think many times things don't go the way you want them to. But like I said, I started this experiment around 2000 where I felt the need to to find this articulation. And interestingly, in 2006 is where we launched our first collection of objects which had worked this sort of new visual Indian grammar, whatever I'd like to call it. And it got picked up by, it was part of the India Now, it got picked up for the India Now celebrations in the UK. And that led to us being invited to the V&A to tell India's story. And I was extremely excited. It was an example of those wonderful coincidences that happen to make something big happen for you. So we just launched this collection of products. They were small. They were, we didn't put it out there in international press or anything like that, but it just got picked up everywhere because it was witty. It defied the Indian stereotype. It was not something that people had seen before. And so I think that was really cool. But what happened then is that we just got completely, I think that it was, I don't want to say copied, but maybe people took that idea of witty Indian vocabulary and scaled it up and did like, all of a sudden there were lots of other brands that were doing things on similar lines. And so then I was like, okay, so we then change. So I think in a way it was really good that so many other people started doing a similar vocabulary, because had they not done it, I wouldn't have moved. So again, it's like a fatalistic way of using it, but of thinking. So I moved, and I'm really happy because I had to work that much harder. I remember the first time there was a bunch of us, and we really, nobody was doing it. So we did not know how do you take a culture? How do you take without commodifying it? That was not our intention. We respect who we are and where we come from. So how do you take those ideas and how do you bring wit in? And elegance has always been important to me, and sophistication. And how do you sort of take all that and how do you translate it? It was not easy at all. And I was helped by, we were a bunch of us that worked on it. So it wasn't just me. But I know that it was not easy. But having so many more people do similar things, I just had to move away. I was just like, okay, let it go. I could not scale that up. And so if you say, what is the word for it? You were saying where it's a challenge and the outcome was not what it should have been. So maybe I could look at that and say, we got covered big time internationally in UK and Wallpaper picked it up, FT picked it up. A lot of people picked it up, and it was really quite cool to have done the things we did. But then we couldn't scale it up. We didn't think like that. I wasn't ever thinking like that. I don't, maybe I am now, but at that point I wasn't thinking of it like, how do I make a big business out of it? I was just so excited that we'd, cracked a few ideas that were close to what I thought I wanted to do.
So can you share what it was? So I know you covered film, fashion, design, food, and tech. And so what was it? What did you show at the V&A, and what was the thinking behind it?
So the V&A was interesting because that came to us, as I said, from somebody from the V&A was visiting and saw some of our products and said, hey, this is a really interesting take on India. And so we got a commission to do a show. And so I took these 5 soft powers. So 2000 is a very interesting time because the IT industry was really giving India its place amongst nations. So all of a sudden, you weren't just talking about the poverty or about the Maharajas, which were the two ends of conversation from India, at least in terms of the way it was perceived. And then you had the information technology industry that suddenly started bringing capital into the country. It became something that was actually, I believe that it gave us, it really changed the way the world looked at us. I really credit them for it. I really value it. I think it was good business and it was just remarkable. Till today it is. So that was the environment that we were in, and there was, new restaurants were opening up. Indigo, one of my favorite restaurants, had just opened up in 2000. We were doing work for them also. So there was a lot going on in terms of fashion and film. Film was changing. The kind of films that were done, that was changing. So I basically made this a dialogue. Made this a presentation on these 5 soft powers. So not just the temples, not just the craft, the heritage, all of that is there, and it's really big. But I wanted to talk about the cultural capital of the country, so to speak. So those are the things that I focused on, and it was the time, I think, for that.
So can you unpack like one of the things, like what would you experience, coming to the V&A? What would you see?
So basically, we were given a massive hall, and because I suppose I'm from advertising, or because maybe it's the way that I'm made, I'm quite structured in my communication. So as I said, created these sort of 5 boxes as it were, of these 5 soft powers, fashion, design, etc., food. And then we discussed each one through either graphics or installations. So you could see, let's say for the IT industry, I picked up a whole bunch of we created an installation of Bakelite phones, which was one of the, they were defunct, and I went off to Chor Bazaar and we got a whole bunch of them. And so we got them and we put different numbers in. So this was the time of call centers, where there was a big controversy about whether, when you're calling in, most of the times you were calling into India, and there were different accents, like people were acquiring different accents so that you would feel that you were speaking to them in their own country. And so that was really interesting, and it's a commentary on identity. So what is your identity? What you have assumed, or is it what you're putting out, or is it what you are, and therefore what are you? And so all of that, we tried to those were the subliminal messages, but in every which way, we used graphics, we used installations, text, all these things, visual, audio visuals, to really bring out these ideas and discuss them for people to engage and experience. So that's really what that V&A was, which was quite stunning for me.
And I think Bombay reminds me actually a lot of London in that sense. Is there's a lot of overlap between the creative sectors and industries. They're not really standalone. People seem to ebb and flow, and so you're obviously carrying that energy from one to the other. But I hadn't thought about this, is like how much things probably shifted and changed at that time, and also that energy.
That was a really big decade for us. It was a really big decade. Yeah, it was infectious. In fact, we'd go out at that time, and you could feel, people from all over were coming back. It was coming back to India to do different things, start different things. It was really enterprising and entrepreneurial, the spirit at that time, and quite powerful. So I think that 2007 exhibit at V&A was really well timed, and it was really nice for us to be able to do that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to make this chronological, because I don't think anything in your career has been really chronological, but I know you've done a lot with furniture, and you recently did this amazing exhibition on furniture design for, on chairs specifically.
Yes, that's right.
I call it the Kursi exhibition. Like, that's how we always, in the office, we're like, where's the Kursi exhibition? But like, I'm really curious. I know you've done, you started off with also in Milan at Salone with this. I think it's my favorite thing ever, is the furniture that you designed to showcase. And again, you brought this wit and this playfulness that I think is rare. I think design in general is very serious, right? And you brought it very.
No, but so by the time I did that range of furniture, I think that was my second or third or tertiary or God knows which stage of experimentation, and I feel that we tried to fine tune or up our game a little in the way that we did our furniture. So one of the objects that I created was the banana table. So in India, we have a habit of eating on banana leaves. And so I thought, how can I reinvent this cultural habit of ours, and into something gorgeous? And so I created a cantilevered banana table. And it's just got 2 simple wooden benches on the side. And it's it's not just, let me take a banana leaf and put it into it. I really feel like aesthetically and culturally, we were able to imbibe something that became an object. And it's really beautiful. I patented it, and that was gorgeous. In fact, it's one of the pieces that New York Times showed that time when they picked it up. And Wallpaper came in and did an India special. Wallpaper in UK, they came in and did an India special, and that was one of their big things. They were like, we love the banana table, we have to have it. So that was something that, so like I said, but okay, so here's a thing, we spent so much money prototyping, creating, taking it, launching it, doing all of that, and then patenting it. It was really expensive for us to patent it. And we received patents for it as well in the US, in Europe, in India. And then we just could not produce it. We could
Why is
not
that?
produce it. We just couldn't find a producer. Maybe it was the time we didn't, things are very different now, and I haven't sort of like put it out again, gone to people, but we could not produce it. But there was that. There was another. I think it was. I think it was a bookshelf, and so I kind of worked with
I
the
love
idea
that
of,
bookshelf.
yeah, that the
What is
bookshelf
it
was.
called?
It's still. It's called the Holy Bookshelf, and
Holy
it works from
bookshelf.
the idea that knowledge is prayer. And I really believe, I mean, it's really a way of looking at life where you say that, the more you learn, um, the more you receive from the universe in many ways. So I took that idea, and then I looked at various religious stands for holy books, and they were all in this style. Whether it was the Holy Bible or the Quran or the Gita, we were all placing it on this particular mechanism. And so I sort of took that, and then we kind of expanded that and created the bookshelf. And then, of course, in your house, it can be different things. So you see what I was trying to do? I was trying to take ideas that were intrinsic to a way of living, and then finding a way to make it relevant in the now. And it need not be something that it was not necessary to know that this is inspired by that, but it was just my starting point, because everything that we were working on wanted to like seek its roots somewhere in India.
So with this, like one thing I'm very curious about is how you maintain that sort of, you've worked on, restaurants, interiors, you obviously worked in film in Bombay, and then you have these like very sort of thoughtful design projects which may or may not have a marketer or a producer, as you said. How do you reset? I obviously know that you have to think about your client, and so you're a professional,
Right.
so you do that. But how do you reset from kind of a creative perspective? Because these are very different audiences, but also the ask and the energy of what you create is very different, I'm sure.
Yes, but in fact, a lot of people ask what I do, and I'm just like, I'm a multidisciplinary designer, because I don't know any other way to put it. But honestly, to me, there's a lot of similarity through any creation. I feel like you first need to just apply a sense. You need to understand what you're going to work with. And I tell you, I've learned this from advertising. I didn't learn it from anything else. Before you got into anything, you had to know who your audience was. And so whether it is an exhibit or a product or a piece of communication or a film or an exhibit that I'm working on, I need to understand who I'm talking to, what I'm talking about. And so I tend to like put all the cognitive skills in place. So those are things that I know. Like I put a framework of everything that I know. Web design, by the way, in my opinion, is something that really helped me structure thinking, because it doesn't work without it. You have to have a structure. And once you've got that structure, once you understand, you've plotted the boundaries, or not the boundaries, but your information. You've got your information hierarchy down, you've got your research in, you've understood. I think at that point, you have to then stop all academic thinking and allow your intuition to kick in, and your gut and your creative instinct. And this is how it works for me every time. And it's a point of receiving, but you prime yourself to receive, is I think the point I'm making. And you prime yourself by studying it, researching it, understanding it. Sometimes I'm freaking out because I'm like, I have no idea what we're going to do. I have no idea what we're going to say. And the deadline is sometimes upon you. And I don't know, but whenever I'm in that space, and even without being in that space, I will first start just putting things I know or don't know, reading or understanding. And then I'm telling you, I think your mind just, every pore in your soul, body, mind, whatever, opens up to receive that, because your antennas are all tuned into that. So yes, it is an all-consuming job. Anything that I do, I'm also a total control freak. So, and obsessive compulsive disorder that I confess to. So because of all that, but I know that I get so into a particular space that I can't do too many things then at one point. I'm so wired into that I need to just do it really well. And then I'm done, and then it belongs to the universe and it's gone. So that's how I kind of like move from something to the other.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard, I think, to understand from the outside, because for me, you're sitting and collaborating with a chef and then a fashion director and a filmmaker, because you're also receiving very different inputs. And so it's kind of amazing to like understand that, as to be so structured actually helps you to receive creatively in a way that.
Yes, absolutely. I really think, because it's just a framework in which to receive. It's just a framework where you receive. And really, honestly, empathy is like key to anything. Like the minute you have that, and all of this happens if you're tuned in. It's about tuning in. It's literally about tuning in and empathizing with what's going on, and you can pretty much, I mean, I've applied it to all kinds of things.
Have you
some
found this time?
Some that I've never done before, some that I'm good at, whatever.
I mean, I guess I could ask the question then, like, are there a couple of projects where you've just, forgetting like the hard things, the things where you've just, even if they've been small, just felt really good, felt like it was creatively something that you would never have done, that you really pushed yourself in a direction that completely surprised you or shocked you, using a medium or for an audience that you wouldn't have imagined you would have been doing anything for?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for that. Like, I'm a big believer of self-motivation completely. So I will push myself a lot to, and everyone who's working with me, to really go out there and do something that we haven't done before, that we haven't seen before. That's really, like, every single time. I think that's something. I want to credit someone here. This is my mentor in advertising. I remember one of our jobs was, she asked me to design a label for a lipstick, which is just the shade number and the shade name. And so I was just like, what is this job that somebody's given me to do, And I just wrote a number and I wrote something and I came and showed it to her. And she was like, is there another way to do it? And I was like, okay, let me be positive about this and let me go and try. I think she made me do a lot of iterations, and then I got into it and did a lot. And then that day I told myself that, this is really interesting, that I was writing it off. And there are so many ways of looking at something. I was also in Pratt in 2000, studying hypermedia. And again, I just, I was like from advertising in India, and I was a senior art director, and I thought I was so cool and so good and all of that. And there I was working with kids who were really bright, and they'd give us a brief, and, I'm used to being really good at what I am. And so I'd just make something and go to them. And then I'd look around the class, and sometimes you're just like taken aback with, in fact, this one guy, I forget his name, maybe. I'm not sure from where maybe he was from Japan. He plotted the Dow Jones on a circular graph. And I'd done beautiful, like my color palette was gorgeous and all of that was beautiful. And it was good communication. But he just kind of like turned the whole thing. I would have never thought of doing it. So really the thing is that I do try. I think those two instances were really big for me to remember that there are so many ways of looking at something, and we have to always just push ourselves until you come to a point where you say, that here's where you are. And I think who you work with, whether it's the people that you work with, your team, or whether it's your client, something somewhere along the way will push. If you get a bit lazy, then something will push you, and you have to listen. But yeah, I think it's really important to do that, and it is extremely gratifying. I think no amount of money in the world can take away the joy of a job well done and well received
Yeah,
by people. Or yeah, that's just
I
really,
love that.
really awesome. Yeah.
And the fact in this passion, like think about the everyday object. So whether it's the lipstick or the chair, and then you're taking that as far as like, you know, the graphics or the subtitles or kind of credits for a film. I know you've done The Namesake, The Reluctant Fundamentalist. To be able to maintain
Yes.
that arc is incredible.
Yeah, I mean,
Any new
we were
films? Any
lucky
new?
enough.
Well, and two awesome films. I was gonna say like the
Yeah,
two
two
of my
really
favorite
awesome films.
films.
Yeah, Mira has been amazing, and
Yeah,
for a fabulous director. She's, by the way, she's a she's a she's a tough client because she will not rest until she's really happy with what she has.
yeah,
So yeah, so it's kind of like it's cool, and so she pushes you to be your best, which I think is also it's critical. Which is why I love working with strong people, because I want to be pushed to do my best. I don't have a problem with
and
that.
she's a strong
It's
woman.
good.
So the
It's great.
films are
Yeah.
called The Reluctant Fundamentalist and The Namesake. And so can you explain a little bit very briefly about what you did for The Reluctant Fundamentalist, which was also based on a novel?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Reluctant Fundamentalist titles. I just absolutely love them. So we basically took images of a million people, like really, really small pixel-sized images, and put that whole thing together. And that mosaic really became the background for the titles. And I love fonts, of course. That's the graphic designer in me. So we worked with Urdu and English. And so you've got, I worked with a calligrapher who did the Urdu text, and then that had it
Amazing.
going into English. And so it's really about, again, the idea of identity, which I loved in Namesake also, which I think I brought out there, where it's a conflicted identity. Again, what is identity? What is a name? Which is what Namesake is all about. And in case of Reluctant Fundamentalist, who are you? Where are you? What are your experiences? Where is your stereotyping? What's going on? What are your circumstances? So that all of these, I think both these films allowed us to really further our idea of identity and what it means. And it was they were frankly dialogues in design to really understand and put out there what happens, and is someone a fundamentalist because you're stereotyping them, or are they just part of their circumstances?
Yeah, well, all of us, right? We're at this point, these films are obviously not necessarily very recent, and it feels as though we're grappling now with these questions in a way more than
Oh,
ever.
absolutely,
And
absolutely, yeah.
the sort of the layers of
Yeah.
media and content that we're absorbing are piling up and almost adding to the confusion, I think.
Yeah. And in Reluctant Fundamentalists, the other thing we did is it's like sort of like the world is a mosaic. It's a big mosaic. And so now everywhere it's one thing at the end of the day. So the pinpointing, the going into something in particular, again, it's a part of what is going on in the world right now. And so we have to be really careful of that and not basically be kind, because really we are one world in that sense.
It's
So
just
the mosaic was our key idea there, and of course the script.
I love that. I'd love to see you do something now, like even if it's just to get this story, this message out there. It feels like a time where everybody has that space to pay attention, and that's causing more anger and confusion in many ways. But for many of us, it's time to reflect, and maybe it's another side project that you kind of come up with.
Absolutely. And that's so interesting. Like right now, each one of us, there's been a lot of talk about a flat world. And each one of us is equally affected. It doesn't matter who you are, what caste, creed, rich, but everybody is in that situation. So it's really, sorry, my doggy's food has come in and he's making a big din. So,
Can we see him?
yes, of course. There he is, wondering why his little. Trooper, go eat your food and come back.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to touch upon is like you're a designer and a creator. You're also a curator and a writer, and you've obviously written extensively on this idea of identity, on the idea of design in India, of India, and equally sort of your own vision for design and directions that you want to take it into. So can you talk a little bit about some of your writing and also how you're taking that forward into the future and in this present time, if there's anything you're working on right now?
So I'm stretched for time always. And it's interesting that sometimes I get called in to write and I enjoy it tremendously. I think the learning curve or growth really is exponential when I sit down to really go in and understand and process and put it down on paper. So it's difficult. It's not an easy thing for me. I think design is really a seamless process for me. I think writing is much more difficult, but because it is that, I feel like I feel a lot of growth when I do that. So in terms of writing, what I did is, because I'm equally fond of academic learning, I set up the museum, as you know, and which is a digital museum mode, and it's a foundation for design and really to do creative engagements. And there are learning initiatives that I haven't done too much of. At this point, I'm just engaging through exhibits. But most of that research and writing, I mean, sometimes I have research assistants who have been amazing. But often, like all the writing I do at this point. And of course, we're going to reach out and be able to do exhibits with third-party curation. But because I'm starting that up right now, most of the writing is coming from me. And it's all, I mean, I think it's there. I always, again, you were talking about pushing the boundary. So if I'm doing an exhibit on seating, I want to present a point of view that you don't know or the viewer doesn't know, so that it's at least something refreshing. And so, or a lesser known point of view, perhaps, yeah.
So basically, what just to give some background, you have been speaking with Google about creating this online museum for some time. It just so happened that it came online just before the whole world went into lockdown.
Yes. So basically, I mean, I've been toying with the idea of a digital museum because I was like, when I did in 2016, I did a really big exhibit in 17, end 16, early 17, a big exhibit with CSMVS in Bombay. And Max Muller Bhavan, and there were a series of twin exhibits that were amazingly well received, and we were really delighted with it. So I was like, listen, I think that I love doing this. This is for the world, and this is what I want to give of India's design stories. And so I want to like put that together. So therefore, I did it. I wanted to do it as a digital museum because it can live on, and it can be viewed by people all over the world. And not necessarily restricted, again, geographically. And so with that intention, when Google Arts and Culture, the conversation started, I was really excited about it for that reason. And then as it happened, we found ourselves in a lockdown. Of course, we pushed the accelerator button and got everything going. But, our exhibits on Bauhaus were launched last year itself. We opened them in Berlin in November. So it was really an idea.
What was the idea?
Which one? For the Bauhaus?
For mode, and then how did it go into the Bauhaus, and how did it end up kind of finding this new life, later on, into this year?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the exhibit, as I said, was something that the company, the foundation, is really for design excellence. It's a museum of design excellence, and it's a digital museum. And the first phase of it is going to be doing exhibits, for which we partnered with Google Arts and Culture. And the second phase, I want to do a lot of learning initiatives, but vocational learning, something I feel like a lot of people tell me that, where have you studied and how come you have this sort of worldview? And I'm like, you know what? I've just had exposure. I've traveled. I have exposure. I'm an endless learner. Like, I love visiting things and learning things and reading things and all of that. And so I feel that I want to provide that kind of learning. He wants to participate in the talk. He wants to provide. Where was I?
He wants some education.
Yeah, I told you he's an interesting dog. He knows when anything is going on. So vocational learning is really something that I want to bring in too. mode as a second phase. So,
Have you had, has there been a lot of demand for that? Sort of over the course of your career, have you had people coming to you and being like, please help me, please teach me?
there hasn't been a demand, but there has been such short supply that, it's
Yeah.
really coming from there. I feel that our designers who graduate, we really, including me, I was taught by somebody and therefore I learned. And then I kept myself open to learning over and over again. But there were two, I was lucky enough to have two mentors and both were really good to me. But I think it's critical. Actually, there were three. It's critical. So you're right. I feel there's a massive need for a different kind of education or a top up on education because that system is a certain kind. And so you need to develop real-time skills like thinking out of the box or listing down stuff, or basically skills that you can apply to whatever you do. So really, that's the thing that I think I want to focus on as a next step for more.
For the future.
For the future.
So in terms of like what you've just launched, so this Bauhaus exhibition, so for me, so there's like, you did this first launch as, India through the lens of the Bauhaus. And I'm really curious about that because, it feels as though we're at a stage where we need that kind of thinking more than ever. The idea of thinking in ways where design actually becomes part of how we live, how we interact, how we learn. And so, first of all, people were very surprised that India had a part to play, in that movement, and that India was influenced by that movement. So I'd love for you to talk a bit about that. But equally, I'm really curious about how you see that manifesting in the present day in India and beyond.
I mean, the point is, I think that my takeaway from the Bauhaus research that I did, and I didn't know it either. When we were invited to say that, listen, there's a Bauhaus everywhere exhibit. Is there something that Maud would like to do for India? And I said, sure. And what's the phrase? You jump before you leap before you jump, whatever it is. I always do that. So I was like, of course. And then I was like, okay, what are we going to say? And what is there? And what is it?
Yeah.
And so it was an early stage influence for modernism in India. And when we started looking at it, I think I'm going to answer the second part of your question first, which is, what does that mean for us today? It means we're all connected. We always were. And we will continue to be. We will continue to influence each other. Now, where a way of thinking, a school of thought in Weimar in Germany has been forced to shut down, and where its professors have moved to America and contributed to some of the greatest buildings there. The building style, I mean, so much of modernism owes its early origins to the Bauhaus masters who were teaching there and some that were practicing there. And how some Indian architects have gone to America and learned under them and learned a particular strain of modernism. They weren't teaching the Bauhaus school, but they were strains of modernism, which they brought back to India. So, if we think of interconnectedness today and think that, the world is a small place today, no, it's always been like that. I mean, again, Bauhaus was that eye-opener for me, where Tagore wins the Nobel Prize for his Gitanjali. And at that time, Gitanjali was already being shown and translated in Europe, in Germany. They were very well versed with Indian culture, Indian thinking, poetry, all of that. That's why he was able to win the Nobel Prize. It was something that had infiltrated down. And so therefore his impact on abstract art, and not just his, but other spiritual thinkers, their impact on abstract art, on the modernists, and then of course them being invited to Shantiniketan in Calcutta to show, and that was in fact the first exhibit that the Bauhaus school did anywhere outside of their own university school. So it's really a case of, we're connected today, we're all on this call from different parts of the world, but as difficult as it may have been at that time, people traveled. Vivekananda got around and spread the message of India, the spiritual message of India. The Theosophical Society influenced many, many, many thinkers, musicians, artists. And this is not just about India and the world. If we're looking at it in the current context, it's really about the world as one. It really is the world as one, and we are influencing and learning. And so it's not a very important point that I think I learned out of the Bauhaus. It was not that our architects or our painters, I mean, or anybody, even today, goes somewhere and takes something and brings it back. It is not like that. It is not a one-way. Exchange is not a one-way exercise. It is a two-way exercise. You go, you expose yourself to something, and you will come back and make it your own. So it is inspired, but it is your own expression of it. So it was the Bauhaus in India expression because it was the architects, then I, what was our conditions, and one must mention Habib Rahman and Achyut Kanvinde, who really were doing these translations. But you can see their individual language that they brought to it. And you can see where Bauhaus had inspired them or where the masters have inspired them. But I think exchange is a wonderful thing because it's a two-way process. It's completely democratic. And I think I love that part of it. And I love, of course, that we're all connected. Like that, I think is not from now, from like centuries, really.
Yeah, and what inspires creativity. And I mean, to that, I actually think it's incredible that you had a learning journey through this. And so when you talk about education for the future with mode, how much of that feels like, you know, you're opening up doors and changing the way people think and exposing them versus the actual practical? Have you thought about that? You know, just teaching design thinking versus the idea of bringing down walls and exposing yourself?
I'd love to do it. I'd really love to do it. There is, I've learned never to say never because you don't know what might be interesting and what might be fulfilling. And fulfilling is a big part of it. And I think that with so many designers who've been at Design Temple, I know they've all gone away having learned. They may at that point have found it difficult or challenging, but they've always gone away and everyone's kind of written back saying, listen, it was, you know, thank you, because we really learned a lot. And so I do feel like teaching could be a really interesting idea, but I feel like it's a little far away right now. I don't think that I would be going there at the moment. I feel like I've had like a long cherished dream to grow Design Temple into a global brand. Like that's another like, I won't call it a pet peeve, but maybe a glass ceiling that I haven't broken yet. And I like breaking as many as I can. And so I really want to make that happen, like in the way that I feel about design from India as part of the country, but I also want to do it for my brand. And so those are the two things that I'm constantly sort of balancing, which I'm happy to do. And it's quite wonderful to be able to do that, really.
But that's also, I mean, the thinking and the doing, right? They have to run together for you because otherwise you're feeding yourself, right? Through both.
No, but I, you know what? I like that because I'm also, I think that I am sort of a dedicated doer. I believe the proof of anything is in the taste of it. And without that, like, it doesn't really make any sense. So I like the fact that I'm empowered to do. I fail a lot more because of that, because it's too much to conceive and to do and to whatever. But I think it's not a negative. I'm okay with that.
So I had a question from earlier,
challenge.
Which is actually relevant to this, is like, how have you found this moment in time? Have you found that this quarantine, this lockdown, this...
I've told everybody that I've spoken to about this lockdown, this period. I don't know, it's been the most productive time for me. It's been amazing because, as I said, that there's so many things that as an entrepreneur that I need to do that I can get very, very consumed by too many things. And whereas this time has really allowed me to focus on and prioritize on what's important to me and what the essentials are. And I think which is why I was even able to do the exhibits earlier on in the lockdown, like in April. I just kind of like, it was there, I had to work on it, but I wasn't getting time. And creativity is a gift that cannot be hurried. Like when you need to do something inspired, you can't just hurry it up and create something. I think even if you're cooking and you just make a mess of it, I mean, you will make a mess of it if you just hurry through it, you know? You have to feel it. You have to calm your mind down. You have to shut everything else out. It's really meditative, honestly. So I feel like it's been so productive because so much noise is just cut out, and I mean it metaphorically. So I'm actually quite
Interesting.
quite happy. From the company point of view, it's challenging because it's not easy communicating and creating and being on the same page when you're all in different places. But we're working at it, and I value that. I really value that we're all like committed to making it work, and we're doing it. That part is challenging, but we're working on it, and I'm sure we're going to come out that much stronger for it. So it is a challenge. It's sometimes it's quite quiet, but I like the quiet, and and as I said, it's been really fruitful. Really fruitful for both the things that I work on, for Design Temple and for Mode. Like really, really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we end, I want to ask you a question about chairs. Like, what is you're very interested in chairs. You've done a lot with chairs. You've created chairs. A lot of designers seem to love chairs. So I'm really interested in that. And you've done this story, we talked about it earlier, on chairs for Google Arts and Culture through Mode.
Yes.
Explain, please, how that came about and also why. I'm very interested, and also from a cultural perspective.
So basically, the misnomer about seating out of India is that it didn't exist until the British came in. This is what is widely understood. And so in our research for Design the India Story, we came upon a lot of interesting writing on ancient Indian texts that are talking about various kinds of wood carvings, like so many different types. I'm not talking about decoration, I'm talking about techniques of joinery, of wood. And then we started looking at various statues and paintings and other forms of, so my point being, I've always run away with my idea before. The words are a little slower than my mind. But what I'm trying to say is that we started out saying, oh, such poor visual record, such poor record of our design history. And then I started looking around at our sculptures and our miniatures and our folios and manuscripts, the Jain manuscripts. And then all of a sudden, because we've always looked at it as, let's say, an idol, or as an object of worship, or as a text, a sacred text. We haven't looked at it for what are they sitting on, or how were the Mughal miniatures, like what is that bolster, what kind of throne is it? So then we started looking, and then all of a sudden it just kind of opened up. I mean, it was that day, those days with everybody at the office was so exciting, because everyone would be like, oh my God, I found this fan. And that, even the various types of fans that we have came about from the miniature. So they just all of a sudden, from having no record of how we lived, we had opened up like a Pandora's box. And so then we went to the Ajanta and Ellora caves, which I've put in our Google Arts and Culture exhibit, which you can actually tour it online. And which you may not even be able to go into right now, because a lot of it is not so safe. So they kind of, they don't allow you in. But here you can go into that cave number 8, I think, where you go in and you see it's like a conference of Buddhas, and the kind of chairs they're sitting on, it's actually quite remarkable. They're all arcaded backs. And so we used coins, we used sculptures as proof of, to evidence where seating had come into India. And so I feel like that was a story I really wanted to tell. Then, after having done that through different stages, then we wanted to bring it into, sort of like pre-contemporary, pre-modern. Like right now, we all know where we are. But like in the West, we have different styles, and they're cataloged. Like, all right, so there's the Art Deco period, or there's brutalism, or there's, there's the Victorian, the Baroque, there are isms. But in India, we don't have that. Everything's like kind of, so we really wanted to try and research and create some language or
Like
some
a catalog.
form, a catalog, yeah, and try and give style. So then, and we sat down and we did that, me and my team, and I had a great team. Each one of them was just amazing. And we would, it was really sweet because we were so excited every time we found something new. And so, yeah, so we managed to create different styles and catalog those styles and find examples to fit them, or examples that led us to sort of give it a certain thing. And wonderful things that we looked at. One of them was the Army Navy catalog, that like a massive catalog that I found in a thrift store, like a big catalog of furniture. So what they were called at that time, we just know what is it? Anglo-Indian. Like when in doubt, call it Anglo-Indian. But so we got a lot of like Indo-Portuguese, Indo-Islamic, we got a lot of styles, and we picked different things like, what the motifs are, where the language is. So yeah, so I think that was our attempt to establish where seating started, what it was. It wasn't just about gods. It was about people, learned people. There was a respect for not nobility by birth, but also nobility by action. So if you were a doctor or a priest, or I don't want to bring religion into it. So I'm just trying to say that if you were a person of high learning, you would sit at an elevated seat. So we really wanted to bring out these things about seating in India, really trace the history and sort of like prove that and put it out there. And of course, create the catalog of various styles, which I think we were able to do. And we're building on it. And it's wide. And there's so many different kinds, because it was all done by hand. It wasn't mass produced. That it's literally that each one is a masterpiece, really. It's bespoke and couture, or whatever you want to call it. But each one is a masterpiece in the hands of a craftsman, and unique piece by itself. So it really deserved to be told. And we're going to keep expanding it. I love that.
Yeah,
I'd love to
I
take
love
that
that.
somewhere
It's
else. Yeah.
so moving. Also, you take the
Yeah.
chair and you literally,
Yeah.
you do what you're saying. You bring down the walls.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
one
That's a nice way to put it
chair,
also.
it's so incredible. Yeah. Okay, so before we end, I just want to ask you then, we've talked a lot about mode and, your dreams for education. So what is your manifesto for the future? We're going to share it as part of, this manifesto we're creating for Open-Ended, and we're going to bring it to thinkers and creatives and designers from around the world to discuss, hopefully in the coming weeks. So can you share just, a couple of lines on just exactly what it is that you're hoping to achieve, that one dream that, as you said, you're really busy, you have a million things going on, but if it worked out, it would, or if it could begin, you would feel like there was some impetus for you to drive behind it in a new way?
Honestly, like the lockdown has given me clarity, not on one thing, but two. So I have really two manifestos. One is to really build the Design Temple brand as a global home accessories brand. I really want to make that happen. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I've made little steps in the right direction. And I'm working on that. And the second thing is, I want to make this Museum of Design Excellence matter. I want to be able to touch lives and really give people something that I was lucky enough to receive, which was an experience and an exposure through learning, So those are the two things. And I haven't sort of maybe broken down how I will achieve that. But these are really the two things going forward I am going to be doing with all the strength that I have.
Okay, I'm excited to see the journey, and I hope that in some little way we can play a part, if anything,
really excited.
to come along. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Divya. This was really inspiring. And
thank you,
can now,
I hope it is. Yeah,
it really is. Everything you say is, I find it personally moving, and I find it hard because I know you, and I'm imagining you also sitting not very far away from me right now, in your home, and this idea of
that's wonderful. That's nice.
the world feeling big, but yet we're connected. So
Yes.
thank you again.